In my personal opinion, I don't think the latest 2 seasons of Doctor Who have been particularly good. I first got into the show all the way back in 2005 when it was revived under Russell T Davies, and I still maintain his era as showrunner was the best era of the show so far. When Stephen Moffat took over, I thought it was a step down overall, but there were plenty of good stories throughout his tenure. Since Chris Chibnall has taken over, it's the first time I've been regularly disappointed with the output of episodes, and haven't really been looking forward to new installments all that much, which is a real shame. Now, based on the title of this video, How to Fix Doctor Who, many viewers who share my opinion will be quick to say, just replace Chris Chibnall as showrunner, but I don't think that's a very productive statement. Internet fan discourse has a bad habit of demonizing certain creative figures. Just look at the way J.J. Abrams and Kathleen Kennedy are talked about by Star Wars fans, or Alex Kurtzman is by Trekkies. Whether you like their work or not, none of these people set out to make bad stuff, and persisting with bad faith arguments, hyperbolic criticism, or straight up personal attacks helps no one. If you're looking for a video moaning about Chris Chibnall without end, then I'm afraid you'll have to look somewhere else. Chris Chibnall is not an inherently bad writer. In fact, he's very talented. He's a lifelong fan of Doctor Who and is frankly adorable. Just look at that smile. I bet he gives good hugs. Also, I'd like to point out there are millions of people currently watching the show and are loving it. To proclaim the show is dead just because I don't like it would be ridiculous. If you're someone who loves the recent seasons of the show and thinks Chris Chibnall is doing a brilliant job, all the power to you, I mean that sincerely. But if you're a Whovian on YouTube, you'll know there are plenty of people who have a different view. But rather than just pointing out the flaws in the recent series, I'm going to take a stab at how I think Chris Chibnall could change his approach to the series to better play to his own strengths. Now, I have to admit, as I write this, there is a certain level of snobbery. After all, I'm just some asshole on the internet with the benefit of hindsight who doesn't have to shoulder any of the pressure or responsibility of running a flagship TV show. Despite that, however, I hope what I have to say comes across as constructive and promotes some healthy conversation. Now, as I said, Chibnall is not an inherently bad writer. In fact, he's very good. His previous Doctor Who efforts under Davies and Moffat were totally solid, if not extraordinary, and he wrote a genuinely terrific episode of Torchwood. But outside of the Whoniverse, his biggest claim to fame is creating, writing, and producing the crime drama Broadchurch. If you haven't seen this show, I'd highly recommend it. Season 2 feels a little off, but seasons 1 and 3 are awesome. I'll be making frequent comparisons between Chibnall's Doctor Who and Chibnall's Broadchurch, but first I think it's worth distilling what the core problems are with the previous 2 seasons of Doctor Who. Problem 1. Lack of character development and flat companions. After 2 years of adventures, 2 of the 3 companions introduced in Jodie Whittaker's first outing as the Doctor have left, and I feel like we barely know anything about them. The same goes for Yaz, who's continuing into season 13. While they've had plenty to do in the plot, going places, collecting things, meeting people, finding things, etc., they've had very little to do in terms of actual story. The vast majority of their dialogue has mostly just been asking the Doctor questions and her explaining things to them. They ask what to do, she tells them what to do, and they do it. What we haven't gotten much of is any kind of charming banter between the Doctor and her companions. They haven't really been making any jokes, no playful jabs, hardly any shared passion or enthusiasm. We've also been missing conflict, arguments when the companions disagree with the Doctor, or when the Doctor gets mad at the companions for screwing something up. These are interactions in previous seasons which really endeared the audience to a particular TARDIS team. Another weird element is just how incurious the companions seem to be toward the Doctor. All the way back in season 1, Rose is already asking the Doctor questions about his race, his people, where he's from, by the 2nd episode. This breaks out into an argument, which is eventually paid off at the end of the episode when he tells her about the Time War. Likewise in season 3, by the 3rd episode of that season, Martha Jones sits the Doctor down and demands to know who the hell he is. But with Graham, Ryan, and Yaz, they don't seem remotely curious about any of this until it becomes a story point in season 12. After a full year of travelling with the Doctor, they didn't ask any of these questions? What makes all of this truly frustrating is that these 3 characters are set up so well. Yasmin Khan is a junior police officer who yearns to take on more responsibility and make a real difference. Ryan struggles with a neurological condition which makes him feel inadequate, and we eventually find out Graham is a cancer survivor who is fearful of his illness returning. Adventuring with the Doctor is like the perfect tool to build on these foundations. Graham could learn to embrace life and put aside his lingering fear. Ryan could overcome his condition or discover he has strengths in other ways. And Yaz should have a wealth of opportunities to develop her policing skills, but it barely comes up in either of the 2 seasons. But this lack of satisfying payoff plays into the other major problem. Problem 2. Great setup, poor payoff. Many stories in Chibnall's era so far have started off well, but then failed to stick the landing. Oftentimes they introduce really cool or interesting ideas, and then totally fail to live up to their potential. A fine example example of this is the recent New Year special Revolution of the Daleks. The premise of this episode was gold. The Doctor is stuck in an alien prison. The companions are left to try and uncover a mystery and conquer obstacles by themselves. Shady corporations and a power-hungry politician have reverse-engineered Dalek tech to turn them into population-controlling drones. This premise is fantastic. The Doctor in prison could have led to a fun prison escape sequence. There are so many great examples from TV, film, and literature to draw from, and sci-fi gadgetry and outlandish alien characters could make it even more fun. The companions on their own could force them to really step up to the plate and take on bigger challenges, becoming closer as a trio by doing so, and the Daleks, literal icons of fascism, being used for police brutality. There is so much potential for just sledgehammer social commentary in that idea alone. But about a third of the way through the episode, Captain Jack Harkness breaks the Doctor out of prison, no problem, the companions turn back into the Doctor's errand gang, and the Dalek thread just kind of turns into a standard alien invasion plot. It's so disappointing, but it's hardly the only example. What this shows is that the current team behind the show are totally capable of generating great ideas, but for whatever reason, they don't seem to have the room to follow through with them. Now, there are some other nitpicks you can make, but in general, these two problems are the core issues with recent Doctor Who. These are the problems which need to be solved somehow if things are to improve significantly. But to explore how, let's jump over to when Chibnall is on form. The Broadchurch of the show's title is a small seaside town with a close-knit community which is shaken when a local boy is murdered. As the police duo of detectives Miller and Hardy investigate the case, the secrets, lies, and past tragedies which have been simmering beneath the town's populace become exposed as the detectives pursue various leads. An undeniable talent which Chibnall possesses is he's very good at efficient storytelling, especially when it comes to establishing characters. Within a single short scene of one character walking down a high street, we totally understand who everyone is, their relationships to each other, their personalities, their dynamic, and the wider feeling of this community as a whole. This further hammers home the impact of such a horrific crime happening on these people's doorsteps, and the sense of betrayal as various secrets are brought to the surface. The show rests on a tight, well-paced narrative and showcases many outstanding performances from the cast. Jodie Whittaker is simply incredible in this show as the mother of the murdered boy. But my personal favourites are detectives Ellie Miller and Alec Hardy. They're the classic mismatched duo. Miller is a happily married woman with young children, a pillar of the community on first-name basis with basically everyone, and is well liked by all of her colleagues. Hardy's personal life, on the other hand, is in the shitter. He's hiding a chronic heart condition the entire time, he's terrible in social situations, hates the town, is habitually rude, and is largely blamed for the failure of his previous case. David Tennant plays the character so grumpy and annoyed all the time it's almost comical. Broadchurch is tense, intriguing, heartbreaking, and moving, but it's also charming, funny, and witty all at the same time. Hopefully I've done a good job of selling you on this show, and if you've only seen Chibnall's Doctor Who, you may be thinking, how in the hell are these two shows written and produced by the same guy? And with that lingering question, here is a key change which I think would completely transform Chibnall's Doctor Who. A single change which would allow the show to really utilise Chibnall's strengths as a writer and solve those core problems we established earlier. It's simple. Make Doctor Who serialized. I think the biggest obstacle Chibnall is running into as showrunner is the format. He's trying to tell 10 different stories when what he really should be doing is telling one story in 10 chapters. Remember what I said about Broadchurch? Each season tells a single story, with season 1 being the murder case of a local boy. But in each episode, that story really plays second fiddle to the meat of the episode, which is what's being exposed in the community. Each episode of Broadchurch switches focus to a particular character in the town, and as the detectives pursue the case, and the town as a whole deals with what's going on, we find something out about this central character. Chapter 3 of Broadchurch, if you want to think about it like that, is all about the boy's father. He's naturally a very early suspect, and he's being caught out in a number of lies. Eventually, we discover he's trying to cover up an affair with a local hotel manager. The overarching plot of finding out who killed the boy doesn't progress all that much, but we as an audience don't really care because we're so involved with this flawed man who basically just destroyed his marriage. Chapter 4 is all about a local shopkeeper who many suspect has a dark past, which makes him a likely culprit. But as we dig deeper, we reveal these suspicions are built on false assumptions, and in truth the man's life is a tragic one which he finds difficult to discuss out of guilt, which makes him the target of an angry mob just looking for a bad guy to hurt, and so on with the rest of the episodes until eventually the murder is solved. It's a narrative which is serialized, but it also allows for smaller individual stories to still be told within the framework of a larger season-long arc, and this could easily be done with Doctor Who. In the premiere episode of each season, set up an overarching goal, which is resolved in the final episode of that season. In between all of that, the Doctor and her TARDIS team can still bounce around time and space, going on classic adventures, but in service of this larger goal. There's even some precedent for this, as Classic Who did the Key to Time story arc. The reason I think this change in format would play to Chibnall's strengths is because he could treat the characters as if they're on one single journey, which would help develop them. Broadchurch follows the same set of characters, all dealing with the same problem from different perspectives. But in Doctor Who, Chibnall keeps throwing in so many supporting characters in one-off episodes, it distracts from the central characters we want to get to know. I think it's telling Chibnall's strongest episodes so far, in my opinion at least, was the two-parter Spyfall. If all of this was compressed into a standard 1-hour episode, it would be awful, but given room to breathe over 2 episodes, it's much more enjoyable. Just imagine if Revolution of the Daleks was a 2-parter. Then we could have an entire episode with the Doctor in prison, the companions on their own, the Daleks as police drones. Part 2 would certainly be less interesting, but there would be more time spent on the characters overcoming more obstacles, rather than simply calling in some random enforcer Daleks. I think Chibnall would really benefit from a format like Season 9, where every story was a multi-part episode. It would give the show room to develop its characters and create better plots. Earlier Doctor Who under Davis was effectively telling one story over many episodes as well. Think about it. The first 2 seasons with Rose is one story, a love story which ends in tragedy. Season 3 with Martha Jones is about Martha Jones learning to stop pining after the Doctor. Season 4 is about Donna Noble taking on greater responsibilities in life. Every individual adventure informed on this larger story. But with seasons 11 and 12, what was the story of these seasons? Right now it feels like Doctor Who is just crammed full of too much stuff, and it's losing focus. As I said, I don't want to bash Chibnall too much. I sincerely believe he's trying hard to make great Doctor Who. But right now, I don't think he's playing to his strengths as a writer. However, that being said, I totally believe he has it in him. Thank you for watching. If you like these videos, subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay up to date on my new uploads. If you want to help the channel grow, join my patrons or my YouTube members, where you can see videos early as well as some other exclusive content. Speaking of which, I'd like to quickly thank all of my patrons and members who are now appearing on screen. Have a good one, and as always, live long and prosper.